Hello, everyone. Happy Monday, July 28th. Wow, last Monday in July. Football season is right around the corner. I believe, 33, 32 days away. But here we are on the Wolverine. Anthony Broom and Clayton Safey here with you for our weekly Monday night show. Back live tonight as we will talk a couple of pertinent Michigan topics and also take your questions both from the fort, from our premium message board, and from you live or watching live. So, Clayton, welcome back.
And it is 33 days until August 30th. I'm excited. But yeah, in about an hour and a half, it'll be exactly 33 until kickoff. It's going to be exciting and here before you know it. And it sounds weird to say last Monday in July, but it is. And fall camp starts on Wednesday. Or first practice on Wednesday. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, it's been an incredibly fruitful summer, but I assume, we'll be in the building at some point this week to talk to coaches, players, or both. So that's exciting. It's good to kind of get back in that. The fall camp battle rhythm's a little bit different than in season, but nice little hybrid of enjoying your summer and getting back in the swing of things. And game week will be here before we know it. So good to finally be turning a corner there. I will say before we get into the show, we are brought to you tonight by ourselves. Use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access to our site for a single dollar. And you should always, if you haven't already, should always be taking advantage of this deal. But there's never a better time than right now with fall camp kicking off. There's going to be intel from inside the fort. There's going to be all kinds of analysis pieces. Obviously, Michigan recruiting rolling here, a couple big commitments potentially on the horizon. So use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access for $1. Well, we do have fall questions about Michigan in fall camp, but I actually want to turn the page to 2026 really fast because we got word last week, and Michigan has publicly put out there that it is in quote advanced discussions in opening the 2026 season in Frankfurt, Germany, which is wild for me because I literally just got back from there. So that's who knows? Maybe I should have maybe not got on a plane back home, or I need to book a flight for them. I don't think you could book flights out this far in advance, but Michigan says we are engaged in ongoing discussions to kick off the 2026 season on foreign soil, playing host to Western Michigan at Deutsche Bank Park in Frankfurt, Germany on Saturday, August 29th. This non-conference matchup would become the first game played by the Wolverines outside of North America. So if this does happen, and it feels like, to use the football terminology, it's maybe first and goal where you're right on the, right before this thing gets pushed across. Or if you're a baseball person, maybe you're standing on third base with it, although not in a Ryan Day way. This feels like it's going to happen. And if it does, it will move their game up to week 0. It would give Michigan an extra week to prepare for that Oklahoma game, which is currently scheduled for, I believe, September 12th of 2026. So Michigan could be heading overseas, Clayton. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a conflicting one because I don't think I like it overall. I think it's one of those things that has some benefits. You can't act like there aren't any benefits, but there are also some potential downfalls of this move. You lose a home game. Now, you had to do this in a year where you have 8 home games, and Michigan does in 2026. Only 6 this coming year, but 8 of them in 2026. Now it'll be 7. This will count as one of their home games against Western Michigan. But I love that opening weekend. I love that you're pretty much guaranteed to have really good weather that weekend. If it's a night game like it is this year, you get an extended tailgate. Even if it's a noon game, you get beautiful weather throughout the day. You get a nice morning to tailgate, and it's something to look forward to. A lot more fans will be able to look forward to and go to that game on opening weekend if it's in Ann Arbor. Less of them will be in Germany. Now, there are different perspectives to this. One, I think it's exciting, like for us, but I understand we're in a very unique spot. It's exciting if you're a fan in Germany, which there are Michigan fans over there. There are fans in the rest of the world that maybe that's the closest place that they could see Michigan play in a long time and would love to see it and are going to go to the 55,000 seat stadium. But overall, that type of travel right before the season, I know it's week 0, you get a week off in week 1, and then you play Oklahoma at home in week 2. But that's kind of tough. Also, you have to play on week 0, which is probably overhyped by the college football networks. It's not, never as exciting. There's sometimes one, good game or something like that. It's not a sexy matchup with Western Michigan. I love Western Michigan. No offense to them. It's a cool experience for Western.
I do not, by the way. Fire up chips.
Right. That's true. So yeah, we don't have to. Yeah, I like Western though. I'll give them a little bit of love. I'll balance it out here, Anthony. But no, so yeah, it's conflicting. It's cool in a way. I think it's a little bit unnecessary. And I asked the question for the 2026 Michigan football season: how does this help the Wolverines in 2026? Financially, it might, and I have no insight into what those details are. What that's going to look like. But other than that, and maybe it's a huge financial win, right? And then I'll understand it a little bit more if you're going to make double what you would have for a home game. I don't know how that works. I don't know who would pay you, sponsors, stadium, the local. I don't even know. But beyond that, I think that there are more pitfalls probably than benefits. But at the same time, it's kind of cool. They haven't left North America for a football game. They've had some outside of the country in North America, but never gone overseas to actually play a game. So it is historic in that way.
There are pros and cons to this. I will start by saying that despite the fact that I just got back from over there, I think this is, as fans, we talk about how, or talking about college football fans in general, how they're just kind of turned off by the traditions of the game being ripped away from them. And a Michigan home date, whether it's against Western Michigan or Western Kentucky or Notre Dame, whoever it is, that's a sacred Saturday for a lot of people. And when you move that location somewhere else, not only somewhere else, if it's Jerry World, that's one thing. If it's SoFi, it's one thing. If it's that game in Atlanta, that's one thing.
But here's the thing: those games are different because you probably weren't getting that matchup without moving it to a neutral site. This one you could get, because
and I was
working
a few
months to go to
right. And I was, you would hope, and if you're someone that is going to go over there, you'd hope maybe it was a little more hot, top end opponent. But part of the appeal is that you can afford to do, like, whether you move this game up a week, 2 weeks, whenever it's played, you're going to beat Western Michigan by a lot. At least that's what you would think, right? And then now you're going to get that extra week to prepare for a team like Oklahoma. I see that. But I think overall, and the financial part of it is the most fascinating to me, because what is the financial benefit to doing something like that? I assume U of M athletic department will partner with someone to sell travel packages, and they'll get a cut of that. And there'll be those types of things. I don't even know if this is me putting on my tinfoil hat. I did notice when I was over there, Oracle is over there. Oracle is owned by Larry Ellison. We know that Ellison's tied to Michigan football. They've just invested a couple $2 billion into their operations in Frankfurt. I don't know if that's tied in at all. I just think when you lose, we're talking about, we've seen just in the magazine that we just put out, I wrote about how, Ward Manuel had put out the email of we're looking for ways to expand these streams of revenue, and when you remove a Michigan football home game, that's one of the bigger revenue streams that this athletic department, this program has going for it. And I don't know, there are pros and cons on all sides of it. I put a poll up on social media, I put one up on the board. There's really only about 20% of people that like or love this idea. There's probably another 20 to 30% that are indifferent on it because they weren't going to go to the game anyways. And there's a very vocal portion of people that absolutely hate it. For me, I just think that we don't know enough about what the benefits of this are yet, other than, what they said in the statement. It could be a cool opportunity for the players and the fans. So I guess how I would grade this decision is sort of incomplete at the moment, and we'll see where it goes from there, but it certainly seems to be trending that way.
Yeah, it's and the extra week to prepare thing. You're coming off a long trip, so I feel like it'll impact it. And
you've traveled internationally. I just got back. It took me 3 days probably on each end of that to adjust to the time difference. So it's really, you have a week off, but you're going to spend 3 or 4 days of that week getting back to, and they have sports science people, nutritionists, sleep specialists. Like, they're probably far more equipped to make that adjustment than guys like me or you are. But yeah, it's it's not a true bye week. Like, you're not going to get back to the States on Monday and start crunching Oklahoma film, or maybe you are, but it's just, it's interesting. And I don't know what the benefits to that are. And until they tell us, it's tough to get a full picture on it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear the rationale from Ward Manuel, and reserve full judgment until I hear that and some more details come out. But worth noting, Oklahoma has UTEP in week 1 in Norman, so more of a cupcake type of game for them. Then they'll move on and prepare. And both Michigan and Oklahoma will prepare a decent amount next fall camp for each other, as they will this fall camp. But yeah, year away, interesting. Didn't expect that when when the news dropped on Friday morning, for sure. That was a surprise. And kudos to Brett McMurphy, our new coworker over at On3, for breaking that news. I saw him talking to Sharon Moore for quite a while on Thursday at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and figured they were just catching up. A lot of these coaches, know a lot of the national guys, and it turns out they were probably discussing some of that scoop there. So kudos to Brett.
My last point on this would be, and maybe this is the pro side of it. You talk about expanding. It probably is still good for the international brand. You're trying to get a foothold. There's a bunch of Detroit Lions fans in Germany now because of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Cologne is about an hour and a half from there. Maybe you're trying to tap into some crossover there.
You got Marlon.
What's
Klein.
that?
Marlon
Klein's from there.
Yeah,
I believe is Manuel Beagle still on the team, by the way?
Yes,
he's from over there too, isn't he? I think he might be from Frankfurt.
Or
near Frankfurt.
Frankfurt, yeah. And then he went to high school in Connecticut. But yes, he is from Frankfurt, Germany.
So, yeah, I mean, you talk about expanding revenue streams. If you're expanding a fan base overseas, I mean, maybe there's a benefit to that. Maybe Michigan becomes the how some people over here see Bayern Munich or some of these international teams. Maybe that the Block M. But the Block, I saw maybe 3 or 4, Michigan gear clad people when I was over there. So there is an international brand. I think the folks over there, the transplants will probably love this. We'll just see it. We'll see what sort of traction it gets from the fans over here. I don't have any other thoughts on this until it becomes official. I've never seen a statement before saying that they're in advanced discussions. I don't know if that's a temperature check. I don't know if that's hey, maybe start saving your money. It's not quite official yet, but I thought that part of it was interesting. But I will be interested to know the benefits of this and the specifics of how it came together, who planned this, who brought it up, those types of things.
No doubt. I agree.
Okay, well, let's flip back now to the 2025 season. I think we're going to go. What's that?
Time travel.
That's right. That's what we do here. We're kind of what do they call it? It's like out of order storytelling, like a Quentin Tarantino thing here. 2025 season. Michigan's fall camp starts a couple days from now on the 30th. Like we said, we're going to be pretty Q&A heavy here, but I want to pick your brain first, and maybe let's take a couple narratives on each side of the ball that we still have questions with, not just coming out of Big Ten Media Days, but ahead of the start of fall camp. I'll start on the offensive side of the ball. One of the things that I thought was most interesting coming out of Sharon Moore's session and some of the things that had been talked about at the event is that, on the offensive line, are there more options there than maybe we're giving them credit for with some of these young guys like a Ty Haywood, like an Avery Gatt? I'm selling that narrative, but I'm curious because I wasn't on the show the other day. Where do you stand on how many spots are truly up for grabs on this offensive line? Because if you believe what Sharon Moore said coming out of spring ball, you've got Gio El-Hadi locked in at left guard. You've got Greg Crippen locked in at center. And you probably have Andrew Sprague locked in at right tackle. So are you buying or selling the spots up for grabs on the offensive line?
Yeah, I think if that was the right tackle situation, if that was like a one of those like locker locks, what do they call it, padlock or whatever it is, it'd be not quite like fully clamped down yet, because he did mention that Ty Haywood, the true freshman who came in this summer, has an opportunity. But I'd be hard pressed to believe that 2, and then to your point on Avery Gack at right guard, or even 3 freshmen would actually seriously contend for playing time. I think he's going to give them the opportunity, as they should get. And I think people were impressed that saw practice with Avery Gack and Andrew Babalola in the spring, and then Haywood comes in the summer. So I agree with you that you have 3 spots locked down. But I think his point was more, there are 5 or 6 guys legitimately that have an opportunity at right guard, and there are 3 at left tackle. So in that sense, I think that I came out of Big Ten Media Day thinking that there's more competition on the offensive line, which is a real positive than I thought there was before. We talked about that a little bit on Thursday night when we did the recap, how he did actually mention, like I said, 5 or 6 players at right guard, plus the possibility that a tackle that loses a position battle, on the outside, or is just a better fit at guard, could slide down there too. So it's one of those weird things. It's hard to actually have a set depth chart where this guy's at this spot, this guy's at that spot, because Giovanni El-Hadi, you could be the backup left guard, but you could be the 3rd best guard overall, and then end up being the primary backup if someone goes down on the other side at guard too. So there are a lot of guys that are kind of in that competition to be in the 2 deep, however that looks, and that's a positive. Now, the big question, Anthony, is how good are they? That's, if you're all competing, right? If you have a bunch of average players competing, it could be a hotly contested battle, but it's not, necessarily, and it doesn't mean that they're not getting better, because I think competition breeds improvement and success. But, you still need some really talented players there, some really good players. I think they have those. A lot of them, though, are young. So, I buy that, Blake Frazier is healthier, repping at left tackle. Lawrence Hattar seems to be firmly in the mix as a guy who transferred in this summer from Ferris State. Brady Norton moved from tackle to guard. So there's some, some sort of a openness, I think, to those 2 spots at left tackle and right guard. But the other 3, pretty much, I have them in pen, I would say. Not Sharpie, not pencil, but I have them in pen.
And something that's interesting, and it kind of crosses over into the quarterback situation too. We do have a super chat. We'll get to that in just a second here. Sharon and this staff seem to really value the snaps you've played too. And I know Hattar is coming from Ferris State. When he talks about Mikey Keene and why he could still potentially win the quarterback battle, it's those, I believe, 2,029 career snaps that he cited as a reason for that. So, I would venture that there are probably some of these older guys that are in the mix. Some of the older, newer guys, like your Nortons, like your Hattars, than like a Ty Haywood or an Avery Gack, who I think those guys can be fixtures in time. I think highly of both of those players, but I would lean more towards some of the newer veteran guys from elsewhere being a little more in the mix. So let's take this here from AJ Ransom, a $4.99 super chat. He says, will we see a breakout year from Marvin? He says Marvin Klein. It's Marlon Klein. He had a good closeout to the year with Loveland getting focused on the draft. Well, Colston Loveland was hurt, and then he opted out of the bowl game. That's an important distinction. But Marlon Klein seems as poised for as big a breakout as anyone in terms of the pass catchers, simply because it seems like Hogan Hansen's still a little bit banged up, and Klein, we talk about the experience, he has the bulk of the experience in that room. So, yeah, I can buy that narrative for sure, that he could have a breakout year.
I think so. And part of that breakout is as a blocker, too. I thought he blocked as well as anybody in that bowl game against Alabama, and that's a huge piece of what that position is. And I know Loveland was hurt for a few games, including Ohio State, USC, I believe Minnesota game as well, and then didn't play in the bowl game. But there is a reason why Marlon Klein was able to play the most tight end snaps on the team last season, because he did block well as an inline blocker. So I think he has an opportunity to be a breakout player. Also, not exactly sure when Hogan Hansen could be back, September, October, who knows? And that's going to open up some more opportunities, I think, in the pass game for Marlon Klein too. And we'll see what their best personnel groupings are. Is it going to be 2 tight end like it was a couple of years ago? And really last season at times, given that they had to lean so much on the run. Might be one tight end in this offense with the way Chip Lindsey likes to run it. And early in the year, I think if you have one guy on the field, it's going to be Marlon Klein. So he'll get some chances. 13 catches, 108 yards last year. Not super dynamic, but did make some tough catches. Ones against Ohio State, I think he had 2 first downs right at the sticks by a nose of the football. So he's been in those big spots before. And, I think can kind of carry over that momentum. And Steve Kasula said something interesting when he was on the In the Trenches podcast during the spring or maybe early summer, that those guys that are in the tight end room after Colston Loveland left have taken much more ownership of the room than they did a year ago, because they always knew in the back of their head, there's this guy ahead of them that is, a top 10 pick, ended up being so. But now they understand it's their time. And Marlon Klein's a senior now, so no better time than now to have that breakout year.
I know we're going back a couple years here now, but when we I forget which one of us talked to Grant Newsome at the Rose Bowl, but mentioned a guy like Marlon Klein as a guy similar to Luke Schoonmaker, who didn't really make an impact to the last few years of his career. I just pulled up Scooney's stats while you were talking there, and 2021, Schoonmaker had 17 catches, 165 yards, and 3 touchdowns. 2022, doubles that production from a receiving standpoint. 35 catches. He almost triples his yards. He had 418 yards and 3 touchdowns. So could we see similar production as that? I don't think that's out of the question at all, especially given the fact that you actually have a functioning. Well, I don't want to overhype it, but it seems like they'll have a much more functional passing game and guy under center, whoever it is. We assume it'll be Bryce Underwood.
Is that overhyping it to say it'll be functional?
I don't know, because last year I thought this time of year I was like, I get that it doesn't look good on paper, but they'll figure it out. It might be a little rocky early, but they'll scheme it up, and they just never did. So I'm hedging this year. AJ comes back for $1.99 and says, autocorrect kills. What about the tight end depth behind Hogan? So you're looking at Zach Marshall, Brady Prescorn. Heard a Deacon Tonielli mention in Sharon's press conference Thursday. That's your guy, so we'll see if he's able to step into the mix there. So those seem like. Am I forgetting someone? There are so many guys in that room.
You're forgetting that you pronounce it Deacon Tonelli. First of all, got to get that on the record. Second of all, yeah, I think you're going to see some crossover. Like Max Bredesen is going to line up in line. Jalen Hoffman, they let him do more of that in the spring, and he deserved that opportunity to play more as a traditional tight end rather than just H-back fullback. So those are, some guys in the mix. But yeah, Deacon Tonelli, he needs to put it together though in fall camp. It seems like he's been a guy who flashes in spring ball, but maybe hasn't survived the dog days of fall camp and continued to have that ascension. So he needs to do it here this next month. We're going to pump the brakes a little bit on that. We're going to let him just work in silence, and maybe we'll see him out there on August 30th.
Right on. Thank you, AJ, for the super chats. Something I wanted to mention on offense, Jalen Hoffman. There he is, guy that we he was the hero of the spring game MVP. There's no way I should have forgotten that one.
A different position, kind of. So that's fair.
Yeah, he's more of the Max Bredesen type. Was a weird format with the split teams, but I think I wanted to end with this on offense. Something else that I think I'll buy with this group, as opposed to selling the idea of the young guys, is it just seems like there's been more, and this could have to do with the fact that Justin Tress was on the In the Trenches podcast last week, and then Sharon Moore talks about it at Big Ten Media Days. There's been an emphasis on physicality and imposing your will, and I think that's, you go to this time last year, we talked to Sharon Moore, and he makes a comment like, hey, listen, I'm not worried about the offensive line. As long as I'm here, we're gonna be physical. We're gonna, keep that standard. And it just didn't happen on the field. It seems like it's been a productive summer in terms of the work in the weight room. A lot of these guys have changed their bodies. It seems like Tress has done a nice job of throwing some curveballs, changing up the schedule a bit, just having them get a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable. I do think that mixed with, I think there's like a young guy like Andrew Babalola, who he might be I don't know if stout is the word, but he might be one of the most like trim 300-pound guys I've ever seen, having sat next to me at that golf event last week. You've got some good athleticism there. I think if you can get these guys to play a little more physically and a little more through the whistle, that might be what unlocks. I don't know what the ceiling of this offensive line is, but I think it can be much better than it was last year.
It's kind of interesting that those comments are it's kind of crazy that you could get more physical than the way Michigan seems to practice under Sharon Moore. I remember Kenneth Grant saying last offseason that his practices were even more physical than Jim Harbaugh's. And I know that was going into the year. Not exactly sure what it looked like throughout the season, but from talking to those players, each and every week, it was still very physical. They go good on good more during game weeks than most other programs do. And it's kind of fun now. The one thing about the transfer portal that you can kind of figure out what the differences are, the similarities between programs, because a lot of guys on different teams have been elsewhere. But it's kind of doubling down on what Michigan's identity is. And it's funny, Dan Lanning, the head coach at Oregon, was talking about their motto this year being double down, that we have had a lot of success. They've won a lot of games. Heck, they won the Big Ten last year. They're doubling down on the things that have made them great and not worrying too much about what has been their downfall, because they're right there. They're in contention. And I think that's a solid motto for them. And it seems like Michigan's kind of doing the same thing with that physicality piece, which, to your point, was lacking a little bit in games for whatever reason on the offensive line. And, it's easy to be more physical when you're a great player that is playing with great technique and all this stuff. And then you can add on the physicality piece. But I thought that was interesting. Before we move to defense, the biggest thing, how good is Bryce Underwood? That's my number one question. How he plays, what the quarterback battle looks like, the running back battle, the wide receiver battles, pretty much every position outside of quarterback, starting wise, outside of three offensive line spots, every position, including quarterback, is up for grabs. Maybe you'd say Marlon Klein at tight end, but that's 7 positions on offense that are anybody's to win. So it's going to be competitive this month.
It's going to be. And do you have any strong opinions on? I know Sharon said publicly there might be a hesitance to run Bryce Underwood, but to me, it's impossible to get sort of bent out of shape. I won't say bent out of shape, but I don't think they know what they can do with him. Yeah, I mean, you're getting your feet wet in spring ball, but now is the time of year where you're going to find out what he's comfortable with and what you can put on his plate. And it's not as simple as just calling a run play for a quarterback. Like, there are reads you have to make, and how much of that do you weigh with, would you rather him making reads in the passing game? Would you rather him, get the basics down? Just because you're not running designed runs for him like he's Alex Orji might not mean that he doesn't have the A-OK to scramble and make plays and keep things alive. So that's the one thing where I'm not ready to plant a flag on a narrative like that just yet.
I know some Michigan fans were disappointed with Sharon Moore's answer on that because Bryce Underwood is such a dynamic athlete, but I think it was kind of just a throwaway answer of, I'm not going to give out too much information. And we have to remember that Chip Lindsey is going to be calling the plays this year. Of course, Sharon Moore gives a thumbs up on everything that happens in the program, but if it's working, I think they're going to go with it, especially in the red zone when the field is condensed and you need to even up some of the numbers. So I think they're going to use his legs a lot. He's 230 pounds. He's going to be more durable than a typical quarterback. And when you're faster and more explosive and a better athlete too, you just absorb hits differently. You're delivering more of the blow. Whereas when Davis Warren ran, and he had a hell of a scramble against Ohio State to pick up a first down, but you felt like in this Jake Rudock was the same way. He would get clocked sometimes, Rudock. Same with Wilton Spate when he didn't get down. So it's just different when you're the type of athlete that Bryce Underwood is, and I think they're going to use his legs. But probably not as much as a lot of people would like. I mean, there's frustration with every play calling, play caller and how the play calling goes. That's life. That's what we're going to be talking about on Mondays and Thursdays on the show. That's what we're going to be discussing on social media. So feed it all to me. I'm excited for football season because that's coming no matter how much they run it.
One last thing. We're going to the camp with the assumption that Bryce is the starter. Like, I know there's Mikey Keene could, win the job. I get that that's the narrative, but they'll have you think that Jaden Davis and Jake Garcia are also going to get a fair shake. I don't want to speak for these guys, but it'd be disappointing at this point if it wasn't Bryce, given the reps he got in spring ball.
I think those guys are going to get a fair shake. I don't think they're going to win the job. I think there's a difference between conducting a fair competition. I mean, how would you not give Mikey Keene an opportunity? He transferred here.
Yeah, and they should. Yeah. They should. If Bryce Underwood, for some reason, isn't ready to play, you have a game at Oklahoma in week 2. Like, you got to put your best team on the field. That's not a promise thing. That's not an NIL thing. That's, you're trying to win some football games. But that's just projection. Like, we think, based on what we know and what we've seen, the talent will ultimately win out. But I do think it's more of the 2-horse race than it would be the 4 options.
Yeah, and
they'll all get shot.
If you're Keene, you didn't have a chance in the spring, and if you're Jake Garcia, you weren't here either. So they'll be given an opportunity. And how are you going to get better if you're Bryce Underwood during the month of fall camp? Is you're going to compete with some other guys. But we have a question about timing and when you name the starter later, so I guess we can save that. But at least for a couple weeks, I think the way to make sure Bryce Underwood improves and things kind of develop the way that you want them to, there's going to be competition there. And if you do run a quarterback, you need to have 2, as Sharon Moore said the other day. So if those same people are, everyone wants them to run Bryce Underwood quite a bit, then you better have somebody else ready. Because as we saw last year, they needed to start 3 quarterbacks, or they did start 3 quarterbacks. One of them retired during the year. Anything can happen. So having more guys prepared rather than less is, I think, a huge positive.
Absolutely. Defensively, I've been trying to rack my brain on the questions I do have. I have 2 of them. One, how good are they? As good as we think they can be, or can they be as good as we think they can be? And 2, who's going to win this starting nickel job? Because I think that's by far the most interesting defensive storyline on that, or at least on that side of the ball.
And there are so many contenders to do it. Corners, safeties, probably some more traditional nickel guys. Like, I don't think he'll be in the mix right away, but a guy you bring in pretty much to play nickel is Elijah Dotson, freshman, top 100 kid out of Belleville, Michigan, and Jacob Oden, probably more of a nickel type in the future as well. So you have kind of 3 different molds of guys that you're going to rep there: traditional nickels, corners, and safeties. A lot of them in the mix. For me, it's Wink Martindale being in year 2 with an entirely the same staff in place, from defensive line coach Lou Esposito all the way back to Lamar Morgan in the secondary, and how much more that continuity is going to help, because they got off to a little bit of a rocky first half of the year defensively, even though it was still a really good unit. It just wasn't quite maybe what it could have been with the talent they had. And then they turned into that elite defense at the end and put together in the Ohio State game probably the best defensive performance I've ever seen from a Michigan defense, considering you didn't really have much of an offense either. So, I think picking up where they left off, even though they have a ton of new faces, is going to be interesting. But nose tackle is a huge position battle. Seeing if guys like Nate Marshall, who came in, a really highly touted edge rusher, can maybe create some buzz here, and maybe by the end of the year he contributes or something like that. There's a lot of talent over there, and there's, I think, just a lot of excitement about what this defense can be, despite losing 3 top 50 draft picks.
That's the interesting part of the Wink Martindale experience last year, is that we talked a lot about, it's I don't know if this is going to work. Like, they're playing well, but also there's been these pretty critical cracks in some of these games. And, it'd be one thing if they had a 3-game win streak at the end of the year. It was Northwestern and Maryland, and then, some mid-level SEC team in a bowl game. They cracked the code against 2 playoff teams in Indiana and Ohio State, and a team that, screamed from the mountaintops that it should have been in the playoff in Alabama, that played all of its guys too. And it was outstanding. In that last game in particular, the bones of that defense are the guys that will be on the field this year, with a couple exceptions here and there. So it's incredibly exciting. I think maybe you'd like to see them. I don't know if they forced a lot of turnovers the last few games, but I think continuing that, something that I liked about it was either I think it was Jesse Minter's second year at Michigan. They talked about how they had watched film of those Iowa teams and how they returned interceptions for touchdowns and flipped field position and things like that. Would like to see maybe a little bit more of that, especially with a secondary where I think we talk about the nickel job too. It might just be matchup dependent too. Are you playing a team that has a shiftier, smaller slot receiver, or are you playing a team that has, a big tight end that maybe you throw one of the bigger guys out there, like they did with Makari Page at the end of the year? So it's exciting to have a lot of those options. I think that for as important as it is to control the line of scrimmage, I think now with some of the high octane sort of passing offenses that we're seeing across college football and across the Big Ten, you have to be able to mix and match in your secondary. And I think Michigan's very well equipped to do that.
I agree. There are all bunch of different body types back there. Speaking of that, got some intel I guess we could share now. Michigan had 18 turnovers last year. How many do you think the staff is aiming for this season? That ranked 58th in the country, by the way.
I'll say 30.
More. Every coach is always looking for more turnovers than they had the year before. So, yeah, I think being more disruptive, a few of those turnovers were in the Alabama game when it seemed to rain every time Alabama got the ball, and then the rain subsided when Michigan had the football. Not take anything away because they had huge turnovers against Ohio State too. So, but yeah, they want more turnovers. It is interesting. Like you're right, the way it developed Jesse Minter year 1 to year 2 and how they were able to just focus on a higher level of things. It was more master's level class. Of course, you had a ton of returning players from 2022 to 2023. But when you have that continuity, you don't have to go over a lot of the basics. You already have it down. So I think they're going to be able to do that this year because you still have a lot of veterans in key spots. And as Corey G, one of our best viewers and listeners, mentions, Rod Moore being healthy is one of the main storylines too for this defense in fall camp. He says he's around 85% coming in, and how high that number can get by August 30th is huge because you want him out there.
That's encouraging to me, by the way, a month out to be there. I was encouraged by him saying that.
Yeah, and then you get to 100, and then you got to build like some confidence up in doing what you need to do in a game and building maybe the strength up and just being used to taking hits and an offensive lineman is going to fall into your leg and all those sorts of things. So there's going to be a process even when he gets to 100, but yeah, it's nice to see that number is climbing.
Any other questions on defense? I think if I had to sort of nitpick, I think maybe edge 3 and edge 4 are spots where I'm interested in seeing who wins some of those battles. I know that Cam Brandt will be in the mix for that. Dom Nichols in the mix for that. Maybe Nate Marshall's able to come in as a top 50 talent and affect that early on. But typically these pass rush duos always have a duo behind them that's ready to grab the baton. And that's low key. One of the bigger question marks of this year is who's the next in line there. They brought in a lot of talented guys, but who's going to lead the pack when we go into spring football next season?
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like it's those two guys right now, but there's a chance for other guys to make a move. So I agree. And just overall, how good this defensive line is going to be. How good can they get? I love the depth. Are they going to have a couple guys emerge as maybe some bit more big-time playmakers? Is a huge question. How good is Jayshon Barham going to be in year 2 in this system? He took a big jump in the last few games of last season, and Ernest Hausman took a big jump too. And now he's coming back as your leader, your green dot player who's going to receive the play call from Wink Martindale. That's a big one. In corner is a huge question, what that is going to look like. Do you have enough depth? Caleb Anderson coming in as a transfer from Louisiana, hasn't done a ton in his career, got a big mention from Sharon Moore last year. Is that because he's really good and he's going to be a viable option, or is it because there isn't a lot of depth outside of some of the top 2-3 guys that you have there? So, and how good are those top 2-3 guys is a big question too. But I think if you have a D-line that good, corner is less of a concern maybe than it would be otherwise. I think those two positions complement each other, the back end and the D-line. I remember Steve Klinkscale saying a couple of years ago, and someone said, how important is it for the pass rush to help your guys out? And he said, why the hell do you think I'm recruiting all these 300-pound linemen all the time? They make my guys look good, and that could be more true. So I think that having a dominant D line, if that's what Michigan has this season, will mask a little bit of maybe what they lack at cornerback. But hell, that duo may be really good too, of Zeke Berry and Jair Hill. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, Shamari Earls could be a guy that affects things early too. There's youth, not just offense or defense, but really on both sides of the ball, where you've got sort of this youth movement percolating. Bryce Underwood's the face of that, but think about some of the young guys at wide receiver, the young guys on the offensive line. A guy like Nate Marshall on the defensive line, linebackers, Owusu Boateng, Cole Sullivan. Those could be guys who are stars in a year or two. We just talked about all the guys in the secondary. There's as good as I think this group of guys can be, how some of these younger guys progress, if not in on-field roles, but behind the scenes this year. I think that's, obviously most people are only going to care about wins and losses, but they're setting themselves up nicely, I think, from a depth perspective. And then you see what they're doing, what they did in the 2025 class, what they're doing in the 2026 class. That all starts to snowball, and then that's when you have a program like your Georgias, your Alabamas, and Michigan's one of those programs. Now they've won a national title more recently than both of those schools. That it just, the depth kind of snowballs from year to year, and it's a reload, not a rebuild. So that's exciting. What do you think we move into?
You lose a ton of talent. You lose a ton of talent on defense after this year. So I couldn't agree more with that. You got to get those guys ready.
How about we move into questions as we I lost my football questions tab. So give me just a second here. Let's take one from the chat first. We will go to CM Cam Hout. I believe I pronounced that right. I don't know. You could let us know. Outside of Michigan's two starters in the Big Ten, who is a better linebacker pair than Cole Sullivan and Jimmy Rolder? He says, answer no one. Yeah, I mean, he answered himself. Do you have any thoughts on that? I think Aiden Fisher at Indiana is a very good linebacker. Oregon has a linebacker that is it Bryce Becker, I think is his name. He's pretty good. So I think from a talent perspective, there are some really good linebackers in this conference. I'm not going to say that linebacker 3 and linebacker 4 are head and shoulders above anyone else, because I don't think they're quite there yet.
He's saying duo-wise, though. I don't know who Aiden Fisher's playing with. It's like, I don't know enough about what those duos look like, to be honest. I'm willing to admit that I don't watch another team close enough, maybe other than Ohio State, to actually make that claim. And actually, Ohio State has a hell of a duo too.
Penn State always has guys. They're they call themselves linebacker U. So I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look into that.
But to that point, that if you entered this year as those guys as your starting two linebackers, you'd be a little concerned just because Cole Sullivan doesn't have that experience. But I think you would feel like that's a position group that could be pretty solid. They're just a little less proven. And Rolder's got to stay healthy. But that is a hell of a backup duo, and you have some really talented youngsters behind those two as well.
I think the more interesting not more interesting, because I do think it's something to think about, but if you took those two guys, how many teams in the Big Ten would prefer, like how many teams in the Big Ten would they just prefer to have that as their duo? Looking at the lower third of the conference, your Michigan States, your Marylands, Purdue. That's interesting to think about. But yeah, that's an interesting angle. I think very highly of both those guys. I think those probably are your two starting linebackers next season, but excited to see what they do on the field this year. So let's go to this one. Corey G says, who do you all think is behind 3 and 4? 3 and 4 where, Corey? Do you know what? Should I move on from that until we get some clarification?
I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe was it safety? I don't know because it's under.
We'll come back to that, Corey. Let us know. I'm going to take one from the board now.
Edge,
just edge.
I think Devin Baxter and Lugard Edekpai are who I would place there. But as we mentioned, he's gotten a few mentions on this show. Nate Marshall is a true freshman coming in this summer. By the end of the year, would it surprise you at all if he's like the Andrew Sprague of last season, where he was a true freshman, generating buzz throughout the season, opportunity came up because Miles Hinton opted out of the bowl game, and then he starts at right tackle. There's going to be a guy like that. Rod Moore was that guy when he was a freshman where he had to step in. Penn State game late in the year, huge game, one of the biggest games of that 3-year stretch where Michigan went 40-3. Rod Moore starts and gets a bunch of tackles in his first career start. So there's going to be a freshman this year, and I think edge rusher is one of the spots I'd say has the highest chance of having that guy. Nate Marshall is a stud. Watch his highlights. It is fun to watch.
Did Derek Moore crack the top 4 as a freshman, or was it? So
they rotated a lot of guys that year in 22. So he might have been like 5, or I'll look it up here as you.
Because they would have had Mike Morris, Jalen Harrell,
Braden McGregor.
Who, maybe it was Derek Moore that was that 4th.
So it was Mike Morris. Actually, I got to filter by snap count here. Jalen Harrell had the most. Mike Morris was next. Iabi Oki, Taylor Upshaw, right. Derek Moore. So he was 5th, and then actually ahead of Braden McGregor, who ended up starting the next season.
Yeah, so we're talking about probably. I mean, if they have it their way, they're gonna rotate 4 pretty consistently, and there'll probably be a 5th guy in there now and then. Is it crazy to think that Nate Marshall could crack that? Not at all, because I think Derek Moore was a summer enrollee too. I'd have to go back and look, but both top 40 guys, both very talented. So it's interesting to think about. I love talking. It's so easy to talk about projected starters and maybe who push position battles, but you start talking about edge 3, edge 4. That's the nitty gritty. That's the nerdy stuff that I like. So.
And that's the stuff that the people listening to a college football podcast on July 28th also care about, and they know the names we're talking about, which makes this so fun.
I'm going to take this one from the board. This is from Ohio Wolverine. He says, what will be the starting O-line? Do we expect anyone to be able to possibly unseat the guys that are penciled in as starters, like El Hadi, Crippen, Sprague? Last year, Crippen was the projected starter, but lost that in camp. Do we think something like that could happen again? I'll rapid fire it. Just what I think the starting 5 will be. Maybe this might be what you agree with too, but I think there's a darn good chance that it is Babalola at left tackle, El Hadi at left guard, Crippen at center. I'm still holding out for that Evan Link kicks inside to guard. He's your right guard, and then your right tackle would be Andrew Sprague.
I got Evan Link at left tackle, Giovanni El Hadi left guard, Greg Crippen center, Nathan Afobe right guard, and Andrew Sprague right tackle. I think, though, Andrew Babalola, the true freshman out of Kansas, is going to play a role and rotate in at times at left tackle early in the season, and that would open the door for him to earn that job. But I'm not convinced that in the next 4 weeks, Evan Link's going to turn into a guard. I don't know that he's rep there at all at Michigan. So that would surprise me. I know it's a theory a lot of people have, but I think that there are a lot of options at guard that they seem to be looking at. And Sharon Moore was asked if Evan Link could move inside to guard, and he said could, but he's probably going to play tackle. Like, he only really left that possibility open due to a follow-up question. So that kind of gave me the read that they're all in on him being a tackle. And even if he did move over to guard, I know you could slide him back, but I don't know how many guys you have really repping at tackle to provide you depth there if somebody went down. So you need somebody to be ready.
I almost wonder if it is Link at left tackle, and then at least early on, Babalola is like the Trente Jones, like 6th offensive lineman, the super athletic guy that they bring in some of those bigger sets. I can see that being where it goes, because I know that being a 5-star recruit, that normally signals early playing time. Doesn't always, and it's offensive line. If it was at wide receiver, if it was at any other position, it just offensive line and playing in the trenches as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, it's just different there. So I do think that I wouldn't be surprised if he's a starter by season's end. I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting the opener, but I could see that being the case where he's like that uber athletic guy that comes out as kind of the extra blocker.
Chip Lindsey, get ready to learn 6 offensive linemen, buddy.
That's right. Let's take this one. A lot of O-line questions, so hopefully that answered most of them.
Yeah.
The
O-line's gotten a lot of love today. More love
almost
than
all offensive line.
Yeah.
All right, here's an interesting one from Jay Schultz. Not that none of the questions are interesting, but a non-offensive line question. He says, who do you ultimately think wins running back 3? Lots of candidates from former walk-ons to transfers to true and redshirt freshmen, but no clear answers. He says, furthermore, will Bryson Kuzdal take the O'Leary route and be another spring game darling that ultimately doesn't do much in the season, or will he actually break through as the clear option at running back? That's a tough one too. My gut says that it will probably be some sort of mixture of Micah Kaapana and who was the transfer that came from UMass? Was it
CJ Hester?
CJ Hester. I like his game too. And maybe it could just be he's one of the only guys that are in the video game. I finally got to, or one of the only guys of that second group that's in the video game. So
they have him rated decently high too. Yeah.
I know he's like an 81 or something. So maybe that's coloring it a bit for me, but I think he can play a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised. Kuzdal looked good in the spring game. Sharon Moore said, watch out for Jasper Parker as a true freshman. But, again, he's got a little bit of his predecessor in him where when you talk about a position group, he tends to bring up everyone else too. So tough to get a true feel, but I would, I think it might be a mixture of those two guys.
I honestly, I could see it going to any number of guys. And I think that I always say this, but it's the one position that maybe more than any other position, the game reps seem to just kind of determine it. You could be the 5th running back in there. You break a long run and you make a couple plays, you make a guy miss. And next thing you know, you're getting carries the next week as kind of the 3rd guy or something like that. So it can develop, and I think it will develop depending on maybe how they perform against New Mexico. Job one is guys like Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes have to help Michigan get a big enough lead to get those guys some reps in game, allow them to develop a little bit. And then same thing, no offense to your Chips in week 3, they got to get a big enough lead so those guys can get their chance to develop and earn some valuable experience. So it's a cop out of an answer, but yeah, I think CJ Hester really intrigues me because he's produced the most out of that group at the FBS level. John Volker, the Princeton transfer, has produced a hell of a lot at the FCS level at Princeton, and really intrigues me with his speed, and I think he'll be a good special teamer. But Kaapana, if he's the 3rd guy, probably someone else is also rotating in with him if you're at that point in a game where you have those guys in, because I don't think he's going to be your short yardage guy. So it's a moving target. And as Sharon Moore says, the depth chart is a living, breathing organism. So it's, it could change depending on situation, depending on who's healthy, that sort of thing.
Well, and if guys like Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes are truly 1A and 1B, they're going to get a lot of carries. You're probably looking at, 14, 15 carries a piece. And then if they do, if Bryce Underwood does win the job and they do use a few, designed runs, those are a couple carries that another guy isn't getting. So I don't know that that's, Michigan over this last 4 years or so has had these, or 4 or 5 years, they've had these running back duos. And the question is in camp is always, who's running back 3? Who's that 3rd guy? And they haven't really needed that other than when Blake Corum went down at the end of the year a couple years ago. But
that happens, right?
It does happen.
And sometimes you need the 4th or 5th guy, like Isaiah Gash. Donovan Edwards was down in that Illinois game. Blake Corum was also down. And Isaiah Gash has a huge 4th down pickup. Kalel Mullings switches from linebacker to running back the week before the Ohio State game and throws an awesome jump pass and had some other snaps in there. So it happens. And I think Michigan understands that. And that's why they went out and got a couple transfers to also add to that mix, because one guy goes down and then 3 is 2, 4 is 3. I mean, it happens quickly.
Yeah, the math changes quite a bit there. So here's what we're going to do. We have a super chat from Derek Thomas. We're going to take that. I want to take at least one basketball question, or however many you want to take, Clayton. And then we'll probably close it out. Any other unanswered football questions, I'll throw in a mailbag for either tomorrow or Wednesday. So I think that's what we'll do from here. Derek Thomas for $4.99 says, boys, the defense is projected to be a monster. What offenses are you most worried about giving Michigan problems, challenging the offense to keep up. I think Oklahoma in week 2, with all the new pieces they have, new coordinator, that's a bit of an unknown. I like what they have on paper, maybe not in terms of, how it could match up with Michigan, but they have a look of a team that could be a playoff team. So I think that could be its own little wrinkle. Nebraska should be much improved. Lincoln Riley. I know some people are down on USC, but on the road, that's a game that will challenge them. Washington, of all these teams, the schedule's on the screen right now, maybe the most intrigued just in terms of how good they could be. Then, of course, you have that Ohio State game at the end of the year. But there are, it's not quite as high octane as some of the teams that were on last year's schedule, but there's 4 or 5 games on here where you're like, whoa, that's going to be, not that you need to be ready for a firefight and to keep up in a shootout, but you might have to score some points.
And you got to have a lot of DBs that are ready to go because some of those teams air it out a little bit more. We saw it last season where Michigan played more dime package defense than they did before because teams like Oregon, USC are on the schedule, that sort of thing. So you got to be ready in a different way to face different styles more than you did a couple years ago. But I agree with you. It's Oklahoma. It's still, jury's still out on what John Mateer, their transfer quarterback, is. He didn't fare all too well in a couple games against Power 5 teams last year, Power 4 teams. Nebraska, I think they improved their offensive line. They improved their wide receivers. And Dylan Raiola has a year under his belt now. So that's one to watch. USC, Lincoln Riley always has it. Washington, I've talked a lot about. I think their offense should be pretty good this year. I like their quarterback, running back, wide receiver trio with Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, and then pretty much Ohio State, as you would expect each and every year. They recruit really well at the skill positions and all over and have a ton of talent. And that's what has made beating them, I think, so sweet for so many Michigan fans because, they are a huge threat. And that if you overcome that challenge, it's a huge it's really satisfying. So I think, that they're going to be looming at the end of the year for sure. But that's you held them to 10 points last year, so maybe not. Hell, maybe Wink Martindale saying, "Who cares? I don't care about."
They'll argue they held themselves to 10 points, but we know that's not reality. Michigan played a hell of a game. Clayton, I'm gonna turn it over to you for basketball. Whatever you'd like to take from here.
What about the one about could you, LeBron James, and a team full of the 4 posters make the Final Four as a 2 seed? I don't think so, but
no.
Yeah, I think we'd probably get bounced round 1, probably be a 16 seed. I don't know if we'd make the tournament, but let's see. Maybe I'll do a basketball mailbag too, because there are some decent ones here that we didn't get to. But Heldy or Victor says, if you could add any player from the post-Beeline era to this roster, who would it be? And I think this is an interesting question. And it's not just a fun question, although it is a fun question. But it does it's a good exercise to kind of figure out what your roster looks like. Now, I was thinking about this beforehand when I saw the question come in. Who are the 3 best players that have come in after John Beeline left? And I could be forgetting someone, but 3 of the best players, I'll just say, are Hunter Dickinson, Danny Wolf, and Vlad Golden, all 3 big men. This year, I don't know that you need a big man to add, though. So I may say...
You're leaving out a pretty major one, but you might say it here, too.
Oh, Franz? Yeah, actually not. So
that's Franz take wind out of your sails there. That's probably my pick, though.
Franz, yeah, he has to be right there. I was going to say Eli Brooks would be high up for me because he's a lockdown defender. He's an outstanding leader. And you could kind of use a guy, backup point guard, combo guard type. Same with Kobe Buffkin. I think adds a lot of those traits, maybe less of the leadership. But if he was there 5 years, he would have been that type of leader too. So, but yeah, Franz is one I didn't think of at the top of my head. He's the best player, probably. And you probably just have to add him because he's a total difference maker. So Xavier Simpson comes to mind. I don't think you need a true point guard like that with Cadeau on the roster, but he deserves a mention because he's also one of the best players.
I'd say either Franz Wagner or Trey Jackson and just leave it at that.
Okay, I will just disregard the second part of that and say Caleb Houston. This team could use some shooting. He can knock down some shots. So
I like that. Eddie, you want to take any more, or
there's too much that, like, we'd have to talk about some of these for a few minutes. So I think we're good.
Okay, that sounds like a plan to me.
And apologies to the people that asked some really good questions.
My apologies for treating basketball like a footnote, right? 2 days before fall camp for football starts. That's my bad. That's going to do it for us today. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more shows like this, more analysis, press conference videos coming later this week, we assume, and that'll start rolling in. So it's an exciting time with a football team that I think will be very good. And before too long, we will be talking much more about a basketball team that has a chance to kind of lead the way in terms of national expectations. So use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access over at thewolverine.com for only $1. For Clayton Safey, for our producer Megan behind the scenes, and for the Wolverine, I'm Anthony Broom. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll talk to you again later this week.